Good afternoon, students. Hearty welcome, students. Today we are going to learn a new and beautiful poem, Our Casuarina Tree, written by Toru Tat. 12th English, Unit 2. Let me give introduction to the poem, Our Casuarina Tree. The childhood memories are always nostalgic. They all loved and cherished from forever. Toru Tat was once a young poet, such who added a charm to her childhood memories and made them immortal through her wonderful poem called Our Casuarina Tree is published in 1881 by Toru Tat, an Indian poet. She brings the celebration of the majesty of the Casuarina tree that she used to see by her window and remembers her happy childhood days spent under it. And it also revives her memories with her beloved siblings. This poem, Our Casuarina Tree, still remains one of the most popular poems in modern Indian literature. Now let's try to know more about this great poetess. Toru Tat was a Bengali poet from the Indian subcontinent who wrote in English and French. If you observe the duration of her life, she was born in 1856 and died in 1877, just 21 years. Within this 21 years, she had contributed a lot to the Indian literature. She was the first Indian poetess in English. She was an Indo-Anglian poet, translator, and ancient ballads as best work in English. She not only learned English and French, but also Sanskrit, in addition to her first language of Bengali. She was born in Calcutta on 4th March 1856 in a Bengali family. She was the third daughter of the family. Toru was the youngest child of three, after a sister Aru and a brother Abju. The happiness of the close-knit family was shattered when Abju, the eldest son, died at the age of 14. The Tat family was a family of distinguished intellectuals and poets. When I give you a few more information about the Tat family, you would really understand and come to know how true that the Tat family was a family of distinguished intellectuals and poets. Her father, Govind Chandra Dutt, wrote poetry, and her mother published a translation into Bengali of a religious monograph. Her elder sister Aru had translated 8 of Toru's poems. Her cousin Ramesh Chandra Dutt was also a writer and Indian civil servant. Still, many more relatives of her or family members of Toru Tat had been involved in writing, poetry, and various other literary things. She also had the advantage of being taught by excellent English tutors at home and later on of the long stay in Europe and England. After the death of Toru Tat's brother Abju, they could not stay at one place since they lost the happiness of the family. They had to move from one place to another place. Even when they were in native land and in abroad, The children had been given good education by arranging a very good tutor. Toru, with all her exposure to and involvement in Western life and culture, loved the land of her birth and remained thoroughly Indian in her consciousness and sensibility. Once she came back from Europe and England after 4 years, she remained in India and started to serve and contribute a lot of poetry to the Indian literature. Besides her well-known collections of poems with the title Ancient Ballads and Legends of Hindustan, published in 1882, she has to her credit a volume of poems in French titled Sheep Gleaned in French Fields, which was published in 1875. This Sheep Gleaned in French Fields had been her translations into English of French poetry and brought out in 1876 without a preface or introduction. That edition contains 165 poems. All those 165 poems were translated from French into English. Our Casuarina Tree, the most well-known of Toru's poems, was included in her miscellaneous poems. That's the introduction and about the poetess. Let us also know something important in every poem that it has. Every poem has got the titles very, very important. Now, our Casuarina Tree refers to the Casuarina tree that grew in the garden of the poetess. The tree is a fond memory of her distant childhood on which she reminisces. She grows up and goes away, whereas the tree remains in her memory wherever she goes. The setting of this poem is when the poetess is in abroad, somewhere on the coast of France or Italy, and is reminiscing about her childhood spent in her garden under the Casuarina tree, playing with her friends and brothers. The theme of this poem is something that shares feelings with the humans, that lightens the burden on the heart. The poet continues with a description of how strong the image of the tree is, even when in lands far away, even in France and Italy, where they studied. She can hear the tree's lament. It was the tree under which the poetess and her friends played in their childhood. The Casuarina tree here itself is a symbolic, the symbol of their everlasting friendship. Thus it holds a special place in the poetess' heart. Even when all of them went their separate ways, it stayed as it was. Now let us move on to the poem. Before learning the poem, let us learn the glossary. It is very important to learn the meanings of certain words. Gallantly. The meaning of gallantly is bravely or heroically. Repose, state of rest. When we sleep or when we take a rest, that we call as a repose. Casement. A type of window that is fixed on one side and opens like a door. Now you can just look at the left side. There is a window that we call it as a casement. We have windows with the bars and with other barriers, but whereas that casement window seems to be door-like. Baboon, a type of large monkey found in Africa and Asia. Kokilas, a type of bird similar to the cuckoo. Wind, stroll, whore, white frost deposits on the tree. On the right side of the bottom of the right side you can see there are many trees there where the white frost stuck on that and found as if snow stuck over it. Enmast, amassed. Shingle, rocky. Shingle, rocky. Rocky in the sense it's a lot of big stones. In very few of the seashores, you could see pebbles like the rocky. That's what we call that, rocky. Pebbles like it from. In most other seashores, we find only sandy to be. But this it says rocky or pebbles, what you call it. Wraith, apparition. What is another meaning of wraith? Water ghost. It also can be said a water ghost. Tranced, dreamy condition. Sublime, glorious, grand. Fain, eagerly. Consecrate, to officially make something holy. To officially make something holy. Even sometimes we make the tree as a holy thing. People go and touch the tree and worship and go. And even some people have been consecrated. When they follow the God's ways, they are also considered as a holy. Lay, a metra. Rehearse, repeat. When you do some practices for the functions, that seems to be rehearse. Repeatedly you have been doing the practice. So rehearse meaning is a repeat. Oblivion, a state of forgetfulness. State of forgetfulness, where a man forgets completely. That we call it as a oblivion. So these are the meanings of the some tough words in the poem. Now let us move to the first stanza of the poem. Before we begin the poem, we could find a number of poetic devices in this font there. We find simile here, metaphor here, and even phrases, clauses, like a huge python winding round and round, intended deep with scars, up to its very summit. Like this, many phrases and clauses are there to give you some idea about this poem with the conjunctions. And also we could find number of images put in this poem. Tree itself is one of the symbol, what you call it, or image. The frost image, lilies image. Like this, many number of images are there in this poem. Another important thing is there, archaic words. In olden English, they used to give some archaic words in the poems. Still, they have been writing some archaic words in the poems. In this poem, we could have some of the words like thee, thy, thou. All these have been found in this. So when you find I, me, my, mine, this all refers to the poet. When you find we, thy, all these words have been referred to the poet as well as her siblings. Who are her siblings? Who are Torutat's siblings? Aru and Abju. So these are the poetic devices are found here in this, very richly found in this poem. Now let us read the first stanza of this poem and understand the meaning of it. Now I have divided this first stanza into two stanzas. Let me read the first one. Like a huge python winding round and round, the rugged trunk indeed deep with scars, up to its very summit, near the stars, a creeper climbs in whose embraces bound. No other tree could live but gallantly. Now listen. The above lines give us an image of a creeper climbing the strong trunk of the Casuarina tree up to its very summit. The creeper winds the rugged trunk of the tree like a huge python. When you roll something on our hands or some parts of the body and remove after 5 minutes, you could see the scars on it. Even after the wound healed, on our body, we could see the scars on it. The same way, in that Casuarina tree, we could see a scars on it. அது தழும்புன்னு நம்ம வந்து சொல்கிறோம். This has left deep scars on its trunk, though no other tree could survive the stranglehold of the creeper. The sturdy Casuarina tree could survive. It embraces bound. No other tree could live. The Casuarina tree has accepted the pain and allowed the creeper to take growth on it. Now in these lines, we find two figures of speech. Like a huge python. So what is a huge python? What is a figures of speech? Zoomorphism, similar. Why it is called zoomorphism? The creeper is compared with the animal. Python is animal, whereas creeper is a plant. That's why it is called zoomorphism. Or it can be written as a simile. Like, the word like is there, so it is called a simile. The second one, up to its very summit near the stars. Up to its very summit near the stars, the figure of speech is hyperbole. What do you mean by hyperbole? The tree cannot grow and reach the sky, and it cannot touch the stars. But whereas this is exaggeration. Okay? Exaggeration, that is called a hyperbole. But gallantly the giant wears the scarf, and flowers are hung in crimson clusters. All the boughs among whereon all day are gathered, bird and bee. What is the meaning of gallantly? Bravely or heroically. Okay, gallantly refers to your bravely. The Casuarina tree remains in that place so bravely, so heroically. The giant wears the scarf. Here another figures of speech there. Personification. In what way it is called personification? Usually scarf is worn by or used by human beings. Tree never uses this scarf. That's what comparing on living thing to non-living thing. That is called a personification. In crimson clusters all the boughs among. A clusters, group of something, refers to image. So it is called a imagery. These 4 lines describes as that the tree is brave. Clusters of crimson flowers are hung among all the boughs of the tree, and it looks like the giant tree wears a scarf. All the day birds and insects gather here and enjoy throughout the day. Every creature comes to that tree after seeing flowers. Bee comes there to collect nectar, and birds comes to there to consume or eat fruits of that tree or something there. So like this, every creature comes towards the tree where they were attracted towards that, the color of that flower, and enjoys throughout the day. And often at nights, the garden overflows with one sweet song that seems to have no close, sung darkling from our tree while men repose. During the night time, the nightingales sing sweet songs, and the garden overflows with a sweet music. That's what the birds sing endlessly while men relax and sleep. We all sleep at night. So at that time, in midnight, we could hear the sounds of the nightingales. That's what darkling meaning, during the night time. Okay, in the dark, that refers to. Repose meaning, what is the meaning of repose? A state of rest. Okay, so that is the explanation of the first stanza. To sum up this first stanza, the first stanza describes the tree having rough skin and being garlanded by a vine having flowers. It rings around the trunk like a snake. This describes the strength and courage of the tree, which is still standing tall. The tree seems to be symbolizing vitality, which is transmitted to the flowers, which attract bees and birds to the tree. Now let us move on to the second stanza. The second stanza also I have divided into two para. Let us read the first one. When first my casement is wide upon throne, at dawn my eyes delighted on it rest. Sometimes and most in winter on its crest, a grey baboon sits statue-like alone, watching the sunrise while on lower boughs his puny offspring leap about and play. When first my casement is wide open, when the poetess gets early morning and she opens her window in the morning, she is delighted to see the lovely casuarina tree. The poet continues to use a lot of images in these lines when she observed through the window. Mostly in the winter season, she observed that a grey monkey sits like a statue on the crest. What is the meaning of the crest? It's on the top of that, on the head of the tree, and watches the glorious spectacle of the sunrise. What is a spectacle? Very good scenery or good looking, okay, good appearance. Spectacle of the sunrise. While on the lower branches, his puny, the young one of that baboon, jumps and plays so happily. We find one figures of speech in this, in the fourth line. A grey baboon sits statue-like alone. Like, the word like is there, so it is simply, you can write simile. And far and near, kokilas hail the day, and to their pastures wend our sleepy cows, and in the shadow on the broad tank cast. By that hoar tree, so beautiful and vast, the water lilies spring like snow in mash. What's the meaning of kokilas? A type of bird similar to the cuckoo. What's the meaning of wind? Stroll. Hoar. What's the meaning of hoar? White frost deposits on the tree. In the month of December, November, we could see the white frost stuck on the leaves and over the trees or on the branches. That seems to be snow-covered area. Enmassed, which means amassed. Enmassed means amassed. In the above lines, the poet celebrates the beauty of nature in these lines. She says she hears the chirping of the cuckoos that praise the day, that hails the day in the sense of when that welcomes the day by giving beautiful sound. She sees her herd of sleepy cows. The whole night the cows sleep underneath of this tree. When the morning comes, in half sleep, as soon as the pasturous place is seen or green grass is seen, it gets up and moves towards it to graze. There is a tree clad in frost. There are beautiful water lilies on the broad pond where the casuarina tree casts its shadow. It gives shadow to the sleepy cows. It also gives a shadow to the water lilies. The water lilies seems to be, that's what you call it, like snow enmassed. Lot of water lilies have been bloomed at one place. That seems to be white lilies. That seems to be Snow enmassed as if a snow has been heaped, found in a larger place. It remains underneath of this casuarina tree that gives a shade to those lilies so that doesn't fade. Okay? There's one figures of speech in this stanza. Another like snow enmassed. Like the word like is there, so automatically that is called a simile. So that's the end of this second stanza. To sum up this second stanza, we could see new animals like baboon and birds are introduced that extol the beauty and nourishing nature of that tree. Tree in the sense it should have this kind of creatures. Then it will look so beautiful, so nice, so lively. Even the tree's shadow provides refuge, shelter to the lazy cattle around, and flowering lilies in the water tank. It also gives shelter to the lilies also. So that's the end of this second stanza. And the third stanza will be continued in the next class. Thank you.